The entire country is under a state of emergency. 5 million Haitians, so close to half the population, are facing severe hunger. Inflation has been over 20%. We think our inflation gets high when it's 6 or 7. Haitians have had 20% for 4 years. It's just absolutely catastrophic governance. But one of the things from the sense of actually having elections, having governance, having justice, having food, having healthcare, having a well-run economy. Obviously, the U.S. international policies in Haiti have been a failure. But if your policy is to keep democracy from returning to Haiti and keep Haiti down, those policies have been a resounding success.
We keep us up like ants in a colony. Organize the wealth into a socialist economy. A way of life based off the common needs. And all my comrades is ready, we can spread the seed. And all my comrades is ready, we can spread the seed. And all my comrades is ready, we can spread the seed.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another interview from Subversive History. Today, we have the privilege of speaking with Brian Concannon. Brian is a human rights lawyer and also the co-founder and executive director of the Institute for Justice and Democracy in Haiti. In addition to his work with the IJDH, he also serves as a member of the editorial board of Health and Human Rights, an international journal at the Harvard School of Public Health. You may recognize him from his multiple appearances on the Majority Report, where he has provided insight to the ongoing events transpiring in Haiti. Mr. Concannon, thank you so much for joining us today. Would you like to take a moment to just further introduce yourself and kind of tell our audience about the work that you do with the IJDH?
Well, thanks, Pat. It's great to be with you, and I really appreciate you taking up Haiti. With IJDH, our mission is really to bring Haitians' fight for justice to countries abroad where decisions about Haitians' rights are made. Unfortunately, most decisions about Haiti's governance, about its economic policy, about its police policy are made in Washington, New York, Paris, Ottawa, other places that are not within Haiti's boundaries. And so what we try to do is to work with our colleagues in Haiti to really understand what the priorities of the grassroots movement and the human rights movement in Haiti are, and bring them to places where decisions about those rights are made.
Okay, amazing. And just in case anybody in our audience is unfamiliar with you or skeptical about your credentials, you have lived or been in Haiti for multiple years throughout your life, working as a representative of the UN as well as other capacities. And I believe that you have also been called in as an expert witness regarding Haiti in over 40 different legal cases.
Yeah, maybe I'll tell a little bit about how I got here, and that may help inform the rest of our discussion. So I started in Haiti with the UN in 1995, and I was part of a human rights mission, and the human rights mission had been there since 1992, and it first arrived during a time of great repression under a de facto military dictatorship. By the time I got there, you had a transition to democracy, but we were still somewhat acting as if we were still doing the same things the mission had done before. And during the dictatorship, the mission was really useful. It basically went around and talked to people, talked to leaders, religious leaders, civic leaders, political activists, went to the prisons, and wrote reports about what was going on. By the time I got there, Haiti had had its democratic president renewed. It had elections for legislature, and people were saying, well, we don't need human rights reports. What we want is prosecution of the people that you reported on before.
Right.
And the UN was only able to do its really useful reporting under the dictatorship because it was this large organization. But by the time I got there in 1995, it wasn't able to do this transition to actually helping to prosecute because of political concerns by some member states, especially the United States, who did not want to get involved in prosecutions. And so Haitians were telling us that's what we needed, and that I was telling them that's not what we were allowed to do, which became pretty dissatisfying on both counts. So I left the UN and joined up with a group called the Bureau des Avocats Internationaux, which was a team of international lawyers financed by the government to try to help move some of these cases through the justice system. And I worked there for 8 years, living in Haiti the whole time. And we actually did have some success. And some of the success I think we deserve credit for. We worked really hard. But it was also part of a much broader evolutionary period, democracy period in Haiti. Because from 1994, when democracy was restored, until 2004, Haiti had almost 10 years of democracy. And it had, in our field, you had judges and prosecutors who were sent to special training programs, who were given what they needed to do good work, who were also held accountable for not doing good work. You also had across the board, you had improvements in education. You had the first and second ever transfers of power from one elected president to another. There were improvements in healthcare, the economy, everything. And some of this was done, a lot of it was due to hard work by Haitians. But during that period, Haiti's democracy was actually supported by the international community. Unfortunately, though, towards the end of that time, the U.S. and other powerful countries decided that they didn't like the economic policies that Haitian leaders were adopting. And so the U.S. Undermined Haiti's government. It imposed a development assistance embargo on the country, which really brought the government to its knees. And the embargo meant that the U.S. would not give any money to the government, but also it prevented anybody else, any other countries. It prevented international financial institutions from making loans. And it was really a punitive and unfortunately very successful initiative to undermine Haiti's democratic leadership. That led to a coup d'etat in 2004, where Haiti's president was literally forced onto a U.S. plane and sent to the Central African Republic. We had success in our work, as I said, as had others, but almost all of that work just was flushed down the toilet overnight. And that showed me that my role was no longer being in Haiti trying to get Haiti's system to work. It was to bring Haiti's fight back to the powerful countries to get our systems to work in order to allow democracy in Haiti.
Amazing. And we just went through so much stuff. And I'm sure if someone's completely uneducated on the history of Haiti, like, you know what I mean? We're just inserting ourselves into the 1990s, where there's already this like period of, attempted democracy through the ruins of a dictatorship and everything that ensued from that. So I want to hopefully contextualize that for everyone that might not understand. But thank you so much for kind of giving us your background and your personal experience that led us here to have this conversation today. So even though this is a little bit immature, I feel like we have to address this on the front end. So the impetus for this entire conversation was the recent comments made by Donald Trump during the most recent presidential debate. He accused Haitian immigrants of eating cats, eating dogs, and eating pets. A media frenzy ensued following the comments, and since Haiti has figured prominently in the headlines. Brian, as someone who has worked with the Haitian people so intimately for decades, what was your reaction to Donald Trump's comments and the subsequent media storm about Haitian migrants in the United States?
My initial comment was unsurprised disgust. I mean, it was those kinds of statements are vile, they're hateful, they're dangerous, and they're completely untrue. I mean, I'll add my voice to so many others who have worked with Haitians, both in the United States and in Haiti, to say that Haitians are, wherever they go, they contribute to the economy, they contribute to the community, they're hardworking and not at all deserving of that hateful and dangerous fabrication. My second reaction, though, was that this is really a playbook, that what Trump is doing, it didn't matter that what he said was untrue, because in fact, though what he said about the Haitians in Springfield, Ohio, was very quickly debunked, but it has not at all slowed it down, because truth doesn't matter. What matters is that Trump is able to excite his supporters by demonizing somebody else. And it's a horrible precedent for Haitians. It's a horrible precedent for the rest of us too, because although Haitians were targeted first, as long as this playbook keeps working, they're going to keep going. And everybody knows the famous Martin Niemöller poem about first they came for the socialists, then they came for the trade unionists, and that's exactly what they are going to do. They're going to keep coming until they've undermined anybody willing to stand up for democracy, anybody willing to stand up for the truth, and they'll start going with people perceived to be racially outsiders or ethnic outsiders, but pretty soon they're going to start going they've already gone to some extent for organized labor in the sense that they've neutralized the Teamsters, but to a large extent they have neutralized the press or defanged the press. They've defanged student protests. They'll be coming for the lawyers next, and so that's something that I worry about. But we all need to fight back to stop it.
I mean, and thank you for that response, because I couldn't agree more. When I heard those comments, I was so enraged kind of by the ensuing kind of like climate of people on social media that was just reinforcing it and believing it. And even when it was being debunked, they weren't necessarily, it didn't seem like they were really, like you said, they weren't really, the truth didn't matter at this point. So that's what motivated me to kind of start picking up some books about Haiti, because, I have a relatively small platform here, but I still felt like that it should be used to kind of clarify and show like the truth, the resilience of the Haitian people through this past 200-year period and all the trials and tribulations they went through. Something that brings me to as well as like, there's also like for my entire life, pretty much Haiti has always been known as this like very troubled place. It's very commonly called like the most impoverished nation in the Western Hemisphere. And I think there's also another misconception that it's like, okay, well, Haiti's precarious position and unstable position is just a product of them being culturally defunct, and they just can't seem to get it together. They should just embrace liberalism. They should embrace democracy. They should embrace free markets. This is kind of exemplified. I don't know if you saw it, but on the channel Breaking Points, this conservative figurehead Matt Walsh went on there, and he was kind of pushed on some of the Haitian things, and he kept repeating this thing of being like, yeah, I understand things happened in the past, but at a certain point, the people just really got to take it into their own hands and like fix this thing. And it's like, he obviously just does not know anything about, the history of Haiti. So could you kind of like address that as well as for everyone that thinks that it's like, oh, well, they just have an inability to like statecraft, or they have an inability to like transform their own nation, and like, kind of like the ignoring of the very, very many external factors that have prevented them from doing so.
Yeah, I really like how you explained that, Pat. And I think the central, it's a several centuries long, very successful piece of propaganda that Haiti is always defined as this country that is weak, that has flawed people, that the world has to keep rescuing. Yep. And that is actually not, if you look at the actual evidence about what has happened, it's actually the inverse, is that Haiti is a very strong country with a huge amount of power, but that power threatens the power structure that was originally established by the slave trade, and that Haiti isn't a country that needs to be saved. It's a country that needs to be controlled to prevent it from carrying out its historical role of liberation. And so that's really the problem. The problem isn't that, that Haiti is somehow perpetually poor. It's that Haitians perpetually insist on freedom for everybody.
Yeah, that's an amazing answer. And I really kind of would get into like, because it's so interesting that we can talk about the things that are occurring today or 2 decades ago or 3 decades ago, and how similar they are to things that happened over 200 years ago. So in keeping with everything that you just explained, I know you were involved in some very recent developments regarding justice and reparations for Haiti. However, these charges are rooted in events which occurred in Haiti over 200 years ago. It would be helpful if this context is explained for our audience. So just to throw it out there, and I learned of this, or at least reinforced my understanding of it from reading the document that you sent me that you drafted, or you at least co-authored in December of last year. Haiti was a colony of France, and it was actually one of the most valuable colonies, right? Like in your document that you sent me, it was as valuable as the 13 colonies that would become the United States singularly as just in its own colonial respect, correct?
Yeah, it was. And that again just shows how powerful Haiti was. We think of the US as being a powerful country, and Haiti was producing more than what became the US was.
Right. And so, what were like the conditions of at this point it would be called San Domingo, correct? Before the revolution. What would be the conditions under French colonial subjugation for the people that lived on that island at the time?
Yeah. So under French, the slaveocracy conditions were horrible. They were, even by the horrible standards of the Atlantic slave trade and Atlantic slavery, they were, for most of the time, over half of the slaves were foreign born, were themselves kidnapped from Africa, meaning that people didn't live long enough to have children.
They died so quickly they could barely bring in new slaves quickly enough.
Exactly. And so they just had to keep replenishing because people were dying so quickly. In fact, but it was so valuable. This is another area where Haiti's made a huge and unrecognized contribution. The growing sugar was so valuable that the French didn't want to use land to grow food. So that's why they got the Louisiana Purchase. They bought it from Spain as a way of feeding Haiti. And it was only when the Haitians beat Napoleon in their revolution that Napoleon sold it very cheap to the United States, instantly doubling the size of our country. But Napoleon only did that because he no longer needed it, because he no longer had Haiti to feed. And he didn't have the money coming out of Haiti anymore, so he couldn't afford to police that territory. So really giving a huge amount to the United States, which is sort of an afterthought to Haiti. But when the conditions in Haiti were horrible by slavery standards. Haiti's considered part of the kind of the Atlantic revolutions that often include the French Revolution and the U.S. Revolution. Mm-hmm. When in 1776, the U.S. declared that all men were created equal. Mm-hmm. The Haitians thought that was a very good idea. In 1789, when the French declared liberty, equality, and fraternity, again, the Haitians thought that was a very good idea, one that could improve their lives and their children's lives. And when there was the French Revolution, which initially was emancipatory. Mm-hmm. I mean, the French Revolution, they initially were taking the liberté part seriously.
Yeah.
And so they started to have liberation in Haiti, but then more conservative elements took over in France, and they, especially Napoleon, and he reinstituted slavery. At that point, the Haitians said, well, we're going to need to fight our way out. Yep. They did. And they beat Napoleon, who at the time was the most powerful military leader in the history of the world.
He's still considered one of the most adept.
Still considered one of the most, yeah. And, they beat him despite not having international allies. They beat him by being very strategic, by being very brave, and being very courageous. When Haiti won its independence, that was in 1804. Mm-hmm. The president at the time of the U.S. was Thomas Jefferson, who had wrote "All men are created equal." Yeah. Clearly did not mean all, because he kept slaves at the time, and he saw Haiti's revolution as a catastrophe. He said, if they are allowed to succeed, then this is going to infect the West Indies and eventually us. And so Thomas Jefferson felt that if Haiti was allowed to prosper, then pretty soon people in Jamaica and people in the rest of the Caribbean would rise up, and so would people so would slaves in the United States, including on his plantation. So he did everything he could to prevent that from happening. He, along with France, along with England, Spain, all of the powers at the time, which all of them got their wealth from slavery. And, it's important to note, if you go to France and you go to see some of their magnificent buildings in Paris, in Bordeaux, most of those magnificent buildings were built during the time that France was extracting great riches from Haitians and Haitian soil. That's where the United States, we got our start. And people haven't read it, the 1819 Project, but there's many other great works explaining how both our power in the world and our prosperity are to a large extent based on on slavery. Same with England, same with France, same with Spain, same with Portugal. Those countries obviously did not want Haiti to provide a bad example. So no one would recognize Haiti. Right. And so the Haitians were not allowed to trade with other countries fairly. They were not allowed to get credit. They were not allowed the things that you needed to have a successful country. And in the meantime, people kept trying to steal things from Haiti, to swindle Haitians, and because Haitians had no support, they just were not able to build a successful country. Finally, after 21 years of Haiti trying to resist, when France came, they sent a squadron of ships. They threatened to blow up Port-au-Prince if the Haitian government did not sign a treaty agreeing to pay back a lot of money to compensate. What it was to compensate the plantation owners for their lost property. And by property, the treaty meant the slaves that had won their freedom. And so France was forcing Haiti to pay a huge amount of money in return for recognition. And this did a couple of things. I mean, one of them, it obviously gave France a lot of money, but more importantly, in terms of where France, but also the U.S., Britain, and the other slave-owning countries' interests were, they knew it would prevent Haiti from ever developing. It was a crippling debt that would keep Haiti impoverished for, it turned out, it's centuries now. Certainly it was foreseeable that it would keep Haiti impoverished for decades, because Haiti couldn't pay the debt, needed to finance it, and then it needed to refinance it a couple of times. And throughout that period, it needed to, in order to make its payments, it needed to change its entire economy to just do export agriculture, because that's where they could get the hard currency needed to pay the debt. So they couldn't invest in education. They couldn't invest in infrastructure that wasn't connected to export agriculture. They couldn't do industrialization, which successful countries did in the 19th century. And really, Haiti missed 100 years of development because it was putting everything out there. The other thing that the debt did, and in fact, and this is something that I think as an American, I think it's important to point out the role of the United States and France in hobbling Haiti. But one of the things that my Haitian friends always insist is they say, look, our leaders didn't have to betray it. Part of the deal was the leaders got their power confirmed by the powerful slave-owning countries in return for selling out their population. And the debt has allowed that to happen right up through today. I mean, Haiti's government was not selected by Haitian voters. The current Haitian government was selected by the international community led by the United States. And so, this is still, Haitians are still fighting, basically, the war they won in 1804, they're still fighting it 220 years later.
Yeah, and this is amazing because you're pretty much answering questions that I haven't even asked you yet. So we're moving right along on this. But the one thing that I wanted to hone in on that I was going to ask you about, you don't have to give like an elaborate answer to this because you've already explained it very succinctly, but I just wanted to point out how ironic I find it, that you're taught about these revolutions, you're taught about the French Revolution, you're taught about the American Revolution, and then you have the Haitian Revolution, which ostensibly embodies all of the virtues that are extolled by the French and American revolutions. But then those are the two countries that are suppressing Haiti's own struggle for freedom and democracy. It's like a very ironic telling of history that's not highlighted enough.
Yeah, I think to a large extent, Haiti is being punished for practicing what the United States, France, and others preach. I mean, they actually are trying to have all men treat all men as if they were created equal, and that is something that has not been accepted. And this was explicit in the United States. So the United States did not recognize Haiti until 1864, which is, not coincidentally just before our own Emancipation Proclamation. And there are Senate debates about recognizing Haiti before that time. And people would openly say, no, we can't recognize Haiti because then our wives would have to dance with black men at diplomatic balls.
I think they said stuff like that, like in like the highest courts in America when they were in like the Senate, they would literally say that exact statement, right?
Literally say that. I mean, it's completely unapologetic. I mean, I think now people are slightly more apologetic, not President Trump, but there is, but the same type of policy of still trying to keep Haiti down has been a highly consistent bipartisan policy choice of U.S. leaders.
It feels like we've already discussed, you know what I mean, so many like different uncompromising tragedies that have befell the nation of Haiti. But like at this point, we're really just at the tip of the iceberg, because in the early 20th century, the United States decided to dispatch the Marines to Haiti and ended up occupying the island for about 20 years. Can you explain what motivated the U.S. to make this decision?
Yeah, one of the important things is this was during World War I. Mm-hmm. And there's never been a time where the U.S. could not put resources into Haiti. One of the things that people always say is, oh, Haiti's been abandoned by the international community. But, as you mentioned, in 1915, the U.S. had Marines they could send to Haiti and kept them there for 19 years.
Yep.
In 2004, when the U.S. was losing military engagements in Afghanistan and in Iraq, it still had soldiers to send to Haiti to make sure Haiti's democracy didn't come back. Haiti has one of the largest U.S. embassies in the world. This is even though it's only an hour-and-a-half flight from Miami, and it's a country of 12 million people, but it still has one of the largest U.S. embassies in the world. The amount of attention that the world is always willing to pay Haiti is absolutely, it's amazing, and it's not consistent with any explanation other than Haiti is a very powerful country that needs to be controlled.
I hate to say it, but there's the Michael Perenni quote where he says, "You don't go to poor countries to make money. You go to countries that are rich in resources to make money. Yeah. They're not poor. They're overexploited." But this occupation, right? There was forced labor, concentration camps, summary executions. Can you kind of talk about can you talk about kind of the conditions that were in Haiti as a result of this like military occupation, which also was completely governed by martial law and military government?
Yeah. So the pretext was there had been some unrest in Haiti, including a pretty brutal dismemberment of the president. And the U.S. said it was sending in Marines to restore order and to protect foreigners. Partly the protecting the foreigners are protecting foreigners' ability to extract money from Haiti. And in fact, one of the first things that the Guard did, the Marines did, literally on the first day, was march into the central bank, take out its gold, and send it back to be held in Citibank, and which Haiti never really got that money back. In fact, what they used the money for was to pay the occupying officers. So the U.S. Marines made their officers part of the Haitian army and said, okay, now Haiti, they're part of the Haitian army. Haiti has to pay them salaries, which of course are way higher than anything that any Haitians were making, but it comes out of Haiti's money, even though we were an occupying force on Haiti. And they did, the Marine occupation was brutal. There was a resistance to it, as Haitians always resist. That was successful for a long time, but eventually it was brutally repressed for long enough that the U.S. was able to extinguish it. But one of the more memorable for Haitians events was the killing of a man named Charlemagne Perrault, who was he was definitely the most famous and probably the strongest of the resistance leaders. And the U.S. bribed one of his associates to give him up. And when Perrault was killed, they literally hung him out in public in a crucified fashion as a way of showing Haitians what happened to people who were resisting the U.S. occupation. They also, as you mentioned, they used forced labor. They installed something called a corvée, where they literally made chain gangs, took Haitians away from their farm fields and off the streets, and made them work in a chain gang to build the roads. And the U.S., what the U.S. did, and they called it a civilizing mission. And they built roads, they did build some hospitals, they built buildings. But while they were building the buildings, they were corrupting the public institutions. The U.S. kept insisting that the leaders, whether it was Parliament or the president, not do the people's bidding, but do the U.S.'s bidding. And anybody who resisted was replaced. Whether they decided to just call elections for a new parliament or remove presidents at their will, the U.S. was really showing that the rule of law was not important, that it was following what the Americans said was really how people could obtain and maintain political power in Haiti.
Okay. And so, at this point now, we've discussed the conditions of the slave colony, the revolution, the debt extraction, the marine occupation, and all of the martial law and the executions and the forced labor and all these things. So this kind of brings us up into like the mid 20th century, like post World War II period. And, it would seem if you take all this into account, this would be an extremely ripe environment for a dictatorship to form. So in keeping with that, could you maybe describe I'm sorry, first of all, my French and my Creole is worse than my Spanish, and if anybody is familiar with my Spanish, you would know how atrocious that is. So is it Duvalier for Papa Doc and Baby Doc? Is it the Duvalier?
Yeah, Duvalier.
Okay, could you maybe just explain the hereditary dictatorship of the Duvaliers that then took Haiti pretty much from that period into pretty much to modern times?
Sure. So Francois Papa Doc was a doctor who had actually had some fame because he had led some very successful public health initiatives to eradicate disease. He got elected president in 1957, and he was kind of allowed to be president by the army because they thought he was weak and could be controlled. And he managed to kind of outsmart the army through this, and he created this group called the Tonton Macoutes, which was a paramilitary organization that initially was a way of Duvalier controlling the army, but soon turned into this nationwide secret police that was everywhere that Duvalier used to control all of Haiti. Along the way, I don't think he started off being supported by the international community. He'd come from an intellectual tradition, the Noiriste tradition that was very much kind of a black nationalist tradition. But he convinced the United States, especially after the Cuban Revolution, that he could be valuable. And the basic deal that he set with the U.S. was that he would be a reliable vote in the Organization of American States and in the United Nations against Cuba and against any government that the U.S. decided was communist. And in return for that, he could basically do what he wanted in Haiti without having much pushback from the international community. And doing what he wanted, he took over every part of the state. So everybody who was in any government capacity really was working for Francois Duvalier or Papa Doc. He brought the army under heel, and he controlled that. He controlled the media. Any dissent was ruthlessly suppressed, sometimes by killings in the hundreds, and his political the jails were filled with political prisoners. The U.S. did not criticize him again because every time someone was criticizing him, he'd start. He'd make an attack against a village and say it was communist, and saying, look, he needed the international community support to keep communists at bay. He passed away in 1974, and he appointed his son Jean-Claude Duvalier as his successor. And Jean-Claude Duvalier, he governed until he was overthrown in 1986. So you have almost 30 years that the father and son were able to run Haiti with impunity. One of the things that Baby Doc did was he implemented U.S. economic policy that was very damaging, especially to the traditional Haitian agriculture. He dropped tariffs on Haitian agricultural products. He, at the U.S. insistence, he disinvested in government support for agriculture. So the government had, an agronomy university. It was providing fertilizers, seeds, equipment, doing state-sponsored irrigation canals. And he intentionally stopped that because the U.S. wanted him to depopulate the countryside, to send people to urban slums where they could be more easily exploited for assembly manufacture. And so Duvalier did that. He was fantastically successful in stealing hundreds of millions of dollars. He was fantastically successful in creating so much misery in the countryside that people were forced to move to slums miserable slums in the cities. And he ruthlessly, like his father did, suppressed dissent with very little complaint from the international community.
It's very interesting, and this is like you already kind of touched on it, which is a point that I was going to bring up because in keeping with or in understanding what's coming in the next decade or so, it's again very ironic, or should I say hypocritical, the nature of the United States, the willingness that the United States has to tolerate people that are extremely dictatorial, extremely undemocratic, murderous, despots, so long as they are willing to push a agenda of anti-communism and economic, like neoliberal economic liberalization. Because, we're going to be talking about how I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I'm just saying it's ironic where the United States chooses to implement its concern for democracy.
Yeah, so you're a literary show, so I'll give a recommendation for another book, and it's Jonathan Katz's Gangsters of Capitalism, and it starts off so Jonathan was an AP reporter,
quoting Smedley Butler there in the title.
Exactly. So
one of the people that was there, one of the Marines that was in Haiti during that time, during the occupation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Katz was an AP reporter in Haiti, talking to Haitians, came across Smedley Butler, realized that Smedley was playing a very unhelpful role for Haitians while he was the Marine commander there, and then started looking and found out that Butler's whole career was doing horrible things, claiming that he was helping countries, but really he was helping the United States corporate interests all over the world. So highly recommend that.
Awesome. Okay. So after suffering under a nearly 30-year hereditary dictatorship under the Duvaliers, a new political figure emerged from the chaotic ashes of the old regime. Jean-Bertrand Aristide. Can you describe who Aristide was as a person and as a politician?
Sure. I mean, he still is a person, fortunately. I mean, he's had dozens of assassination attempts, but none of them have succeeded. So Aristide came out of the liberation theology movement. It was basically a reading of the Bible that states that what Jesus was really talking about was social justice. That Jesus was not telling everybody to wait for heaven for their rewards, that you needed to fight while you were on the earth to dismantle social injustice, to make an option for the poor so that the poor could have reasonably dignified lives while they were still alive. And that kind of message obviously was attractive in a Haiti that had just undergone 30 years of repression from the Duvaliers. And that was a key organizing point that led to the Duvalier's departure, where he had been supported again by the United States, and as the protests against his regime mounted, he was still supported. And it was only when the United States finally saw the writing on the wall and said, this guy's going to be thrown out soon. We need to look like we're on the right side of things, that the U.S. flew him out on a U.S. plane to Paris with probably millions of dollars of stuff that he had stolen, both money, furs, jewels, lots of things were all put on this big cargo plane.
It's Air Force One, right?
I can't remember if it's that. That might.
Wikipedia. I was on his Wikipedia earlier. It said it was Air Force One.
Okay. I mean, I know it was a big plane, and he had all the time he needed to take whatever he wanted with him. And so then Aristide went. So once Duvalier was kicked out, the U.S. policy for several years was what Haitians called Duvalierism without Duvalier. So it was clear that Duvalier himself was toxic, but the U.S. tried to have other people, including military leaders, who would basically impose the same policies of that the United States wanted: economic liberalization, less support for public services, a stronger unregulated free market approach, and one that would increase economic inequality. And that struggle went back and forth for about 5 years. It finally ended in 1991 when you actually had a fair election in Haiti, and there were, I believe, there were 16 candidates running, and I'm forgetting the numbers now, but Aristide won an overwhelming, I think it was over 60% of the vote.
Yeah. I'm not trying to correct, but I've kind of spent the last week just really scouring and taking notes on this. I believe it was 67%.
Okay, great. That sounds right. And he won an overwhelming victory, and it was hard for the U.S. to try to walk that back. And so he was installed as president in January of 1991. The first coup d'etat against him actually happened a couple weeks before his inauguration, because the Haitian elites, they did not want someone who came to power with huge popular support, who was talking about equality, who was talking about expanding educational opportunities, expanding healthcare, expanding workers' rights, other things that were very dangerous to people who benefited from a structurally unequal Haiti. And he went beyond that. He started talking. He went to the UN. He gave very public speeches where he was connecting Haiti's poverty to the unjust economic structures that made other places, especially the United States, relatively wealthy. That obviously posed a threat. And so you had these Haitian elites who did not like Aristide calling for justice within the country. And then you had the international elites who did not want him calling for less injustice internationally. And they really joined forces. In September of 1991, so about 8 months after Aristide was inaugurated, there was a coup d'etat, and he was whisked off first to Venezuela and then to Washington, D.C. There were an estimated 2,000 people killed in just the first few days of the coup d'etat, another 1,000 over the next 3 years, hundreds of thousands of people displaced, hundreds put in political prisons. You had a really brutal 3 years of it was basically the army under the orders of the international and national elites trying to put the the cap of back on the bottle of liberation. That Aristide had spoken about, and we had these 30 years of the Duvaliers really imposing impression on people, and then Aristide had really opened the door to liberation by having this president talking about equality, and people, for very good reason, loved that. But then, so the coup d'etat of 91 to 94 was basically about educating the Haitian people to give up all hope of dignity and equality.
Yeah, and that brings me right to my next question. Aristide received wide and emphatic support from Haiti's poor masses. Reactionary elements in the country would seek to diminish this support through brute violence. One of the most well-known examples of this is the Rabatou massacre, which now we're kind of getting into the chapter where you're actually, much more directly involved in the things because you were actually involved in the prosecution of the individuals who carried out this massacre. So just to kind of explain it to our audience, could you describe the events of that massacre and kind of what your involvement was in prosecuting it?
Sure. So the Rabatou massacre happened in April of 1994. So remember that the coup d'etat happened in September of 1991. And so this was a little bit under 3 years after the coup d'etat. By this point, Haiti had been almost completely pacified. People had just, the people who were willing to resist had been killed, exiled, or just beaten into submission, and no longer willing to openly resist, except for the neighborhood of Rabatou, which was in Gonaïves, which is about 3 hours north of the capital Port-au-Prince on the seacoast. And Rabatou is a really poor area. It's a place where people have very little to lose, and it's also a neighborhood that prides itself on political activity, and especially against dictatorships. And in fact, Rabatou was where the demonstrations that triggered Duvalier's fall had started there. And so when the during the 91 and 94 coup, people in the neighborhood kept resisting. They had to be stealthy about it, but they would do things like, right before dawn, they'd stack a bunch of tires together and they'd douse it with gasoline and they'd light it on fire. And people would wake up all over the area, and you could see it for miles and miles around. People would see that plume of smoke, and they knew what it was. And they knew that the people of Rabatou were still resisting. And it was a very powerful symbol for people in the city of Gonaïves, but all over Haiti, that there were people who had not given up. And the army knew it was a powerful symbol, and they wanted to take care of it. They couldn't catch any of the people of Rabatou. They tried to catch them actually doing political activity, never could. So they just decided one day just to finish with the problem. And their way of finishing with the problem was before dawn, they sent both military units and paramilitary units just to go and break heads. They went from house to house. They beat people up. They stole things. They broke things. They knocked houses down. And when people who were active in the resistance fled, they were shot. Rabatou is a fishing village, and typically when people were under attack by the police, they'd run to boats. But this time, the military and the paramilitaries, they had their own boats, and so when people either ran to the beach or actually got onto boats, they would shoot them there. And no one knows how many people were killed. I think the estimates are in the dozens, but there were certainly many dozens more who were terrorized, who were beaten, who were jailed, many having very serious injuries.
Right. And, I know that you mentioned the paramilitaries as well. I was reading about FRAPH. I don't know if people call that FRAF as a shorthand or something like that. But I was reading.
Yes, FRAP, because FRAP is French or Creole for hit. So okay. And it was very intentionally made to have an acronym that meant hit.
Well, I was reading that this group and its leader, Emmanuel Constant, both were receiving funding and information from the CIA at this time.
Yes. So for most of the time through the de facto regime, Emmanuel Constant was an informant for U.S. intelligence services. They knew exactly what he was up to. They encouraged his activities. And in one case, so the Rabateau massacre happened in April of 1994. A few months before, in September of 1993, there had actually been a deal struck between the Haitian government, among the Haitian government, the U.S., and the military to return democracy. It was the Haitian government felt that they made a lot of compromises, but the military government said they didn't make enough compromises, and they sabotaged it by sending FRAP people. So the deal was supposed to be enforced by a U.S. Battleship coming in with troops to try to keep the peace. And when that battleship arrived in Port-au-Prince Harbor, the FRAP did a demonstration, and that prevented the ship from coming aboard. And all of this was actually caught on film, and it would have been comical if it weren't so. If the
tragic,
impact wasn't tragic, it wasn't so serious to all the Haitians who were killed and beaten during that time. But it was literally a bunch of guys with clubs. They made a U.S. battleship turn around and leave. And of course, a U.S. diplomat who has been incredibly connected with intelligence services was actually there at the demonstration. So you have a U.S. diplomat in her limousine. It was safe for her, but the battleship needed to turn and run for safety. Clearly it was set up because the U.S. wanted to extract more concessions from the Haitian government.
And yeah, if anybody wants to learn more about that, like I said, Brian here represented the victims of the Rabateau massacre. And if anybody wants to know more about that, there's a documentary online. I'm not even going to attempt to say the Creole the name of it, but it's He Who Bears the Scar Remembers. You can find that online. It's on Vimeo. I believe it's on the IJDH website that you can watch it there as well. Also, viewer discretion is advised when you check that out. Just know that, this is a pretty grim event, and there is also some grim footage in there. But our guest here, Brian, is featured in it multiple times. So if anybody wants to learn more about that. So moving forward here, if there was any skepticism regarding Aristide's, extreme popularity among Haiti, it should be dispelled considering he was once again elected president of Haiti with a resounding majority in 2001. Now, in his second term, he began to levy charges against France and their responsibility in Haiti's underdevelopment. Can you explain these charges and kind of, what his political platform was at that time during his second administration?
Sure. And this was, Aristide had always been upfront of making connections between international policy and Haiti's poverty. And one of the ways he did it was through the restitution claim. And, as as we mentioned, Haiti had been forced to pay a huge debt to get recognized. And it had paid all that plus the money that it cost to renegotiate, plus all the interest to the banks, which was multiple times the cost of the original loan. You also had opportunity cost where Haiti was not able to develop during that time. Starting in 2001, President Aristide said, "Okay, I've been calling for international injustice. That's not working. Let's start asserting legal rights." And so we brought together a team to help prepare a claim for the restitution of the debt. And this had been something that Haitians had talked about for decades. It was very clear that they made the connections between Haiti's poverty and the debt. They made connections that it was certainly morally reprehensible, but some legal scholars had for a long time been talking about this as not only morally reprehensible, it's also illegal and gives rise to a cause of action. There's a couple of different theories. One of them is a theory called unjust enrichment. Another is that that at the time that the debt was imposed, it was actually, although slavery was still legal, it was illegal because we still had it in the United States for another 35 years. It was illegal to extend slavery to somewhere where it had been abolished, and that by threatening to reinstitute slavery in Haiti, that France had broken that law. So you had these legal scholars who had been developing these theories for some time, and Aristide said, "Okay, let's put this onto paper and see,
give it a shot,
see what happens." And so he did, and he got some legal team. I had a minor role in that. Our office provided a little bit of backup to some of the people who were putting that together, and we're involved in some of the discussions around strategy. But one of the things that Aristide did was also to get this out of the discussions with his lawyers and really bring it into discussions with the people. He talked about the legal issues. He talked about the history behind it, and he also talked about what Haiti could do with the money it got back from France. And he talked about, the reason why we don't have schools is that France extorted this money. If we get our money back, we'll have schools. And this is why we don't have hospitals. We'll have hospitals. And he came up with his government came up with very detailed plans about what could happen if the money was returned. They calculated the money at $21 billion. And they, really came up with a plan. Okay, this is what $21 billion will do for you, taxpayer. This will do for your children, for future generations. And it really was an attempt to build Haiti on a completely different foundation, one that would not have endemic poverty, endemic vulnerability to natural disaster, endemic instability. I mean, it was an attempt to create a prosperous, just country.
Well, I mean, that all sounds great, but maybe how did France and America respond to that situation?
Well, I mean, it's the same way, you would say that Haitians really calling for liberté in 1804 sounds great.
Exactly.
But not everybody agreed with you. And just as Thomas Jefferson wouldn't have agreed with you and didn't agree with you in 1804, France and the U.S. did not agree with Aristide making that legal claim in 2004. And I mean, in the sense that Jefferson was right, they were right. If Haiti had been allowed to succeed, then the revolution would have spread, and Caribbean countries would have risen up, and that enslaved people in the United States probably would have risen up. And speaking as a white person, although my genes weren't here at that time, our lives would not be as prosperous as they are now. And in a very similar way, what Haiti and France saw, that Haiti wasn't just asking for $21 billion. France could have paid the $21 billion. Right. I mean, it would have been a big hit, but it would not have changed the lives of any French people, not in a noticeable way. But what it would have done was open the door to broader reparations. So just as Haiti's independence in 1804 would have opened the door to broader freedom if allowed to succeed, if Haiti's restitution claims,
exactly 200 years, it's exactly 200 years apart as well, which is very interesting. Yeah.
Haiti's restitution claim would have opened the door to broader reparations. There's a very strong moral claim for everybody injured by slavery that they should get some kind of compensation. That moral claim in general, there's a lot of creative thinking being done around that, how to translate that strong moral claim into a strong legal claim. But it's generally acknowledged that Haiti's restitution claim, which is a subset of the bigger reparations movement, that Haiti's restitution claim is the strongest, or at least one of the strongest legal claims out there within the broader reparations movement. And so France and Haiti and the U.S., they feared that if Haiti were allowed to present its restitution claim, that would open the door to reparations, which, France could have afforded $21 billion. But, if the United States and Europe are forced to pay reparations, that is going to, it's not going to end life as we now know it, but it's certainly going to affect the lifestyles of of everybody who is, benefiting, sitting on a platform that was built through slavery. And what it also is going to do is it's going to, if reparations were really done, it would rebalance the powers of the world. And so that not only would we have to pay some of our existing wealth, but it would limit our ability to generate wealth in the future by exploiting weaker countries. Once Haiti and other countries in the global south start developing their own education systems, they start building their own infrastructure because they have the reparations money to do that, then they're going to be able to compete with us on a level playing field, which obviously that we lose the benefits of the unfair playing field that we've had for the last 3 centuries.
Right. And so that type of fear of the example that could be set by Haiti by kind of like, becoming self-sufficient, becoming not so dependent on aid, not needing loans from the IMF or the World Bank and enduring structural adjustment programs and things like that, that struck fear, much like the revolution in 1804 did to the slave-holding colonies, the exploitative imperial core that still exists today that through neo-colonial economic coercion still kind of maintains the kind of global apartheid system that we see between the imperial core and the global south. As a result of that fear, there was another coup against Aristide, correct?
Yes. So what the U.S. did was it imposed this development assistance embargo on Haiti, as we discussed before, and that both weakened the government's ability to do things like pay its police and otherwise defend itself. It decreased public support. I think if on the eve of the coup, if there had been another election, that Aristide would have easily won it. But it definitely decreased people's belief that democracy could improve their lives because they had voted, they'd gotten the leaders they voted for, and then those leaders were prevented from adequately providing basic government services. And so it really was a demobilizing effort. And so you had this kind of weakened government. And then there were former soldiers, many of them trained and otherwise associated with the United States, who were training in the Dominican Republic. They made a couple attacks, and everybody knew they were doing it, but the Dominican Republic did not prevent them from continuing to train and attack from there. And there was this sort of civil society group funded by the United States that was opening the way to an invasion by creating these very provocative, violent demonstrations and forcing the police to be stretched out responding to those. So in this very complicated context, you had the rebels training the Dominican Republic, many of them former soldiers who had been leaders of the 91 to 94 brutality. They crossed the border and started taking over Haiti. They executed people who police officers and other government officials that didn't agree with them. They killed people. They let out everybody in prisons along their path, and they took over a big chunk of the country. And partly it's because the police themselves had to focus on Port-au-Prince because lack of resources, and that's where the provocative demonstrations were. And so you had the situation where the attackers had taken over most of the countryside, but Port-au-Prince was still, that's where the police were making their final stand, and that there was a lot of people that were very supportive of President Aristide and were willing to fight to defend their democracy. It's hard to say, how long, if there had been a battle, how long that would have lasted. We do know that the attackers, they suddenly paused after having moved towards Port-au-Prince rapidly for several days. They paused for a couple of days. And during that pause, the United States literally forced President Aristide onto a plane that had come from Guantanamo Bay. It filed a false flight plan. It refueled elsewhere in the Caribbean, lying about what it was doing, and then flew President Aristide to the Central African Republic and really just dumped them there. I went there. I was there 3 or 4 days after he was sent there. And I just come from Haiti, which had been was on the clearly falling apart, but I'd never been to a place nearly as obviously unstable as the DRC. And it was clear that they put him somewhere where his life would be in danger and where he could not be reached for communications.
Right. Well, and so then I would like to ask, that was about 20 years ago that occurred. Obviously the United States, France, had intervened because they alleged that Aristide was tyrannical and all of these things. What has Haiti been like since his departure? What have the past 20 years of Haitian civil life been like? Has there been flourishing democracy? Has there been stability? Has there been, progressive, institutions?
Yeah. Haiti has not come close to reaching the level of governance that it had on the eve of the 2004 coup d'etat. I think I mentioned earlier that during the 10 years from 1994 to 2004, where Haiti had democracy, you had 2 consecutive transfers of power from one elected president to another. In the 20 years since, there's been one, and that was in 2010, and actually a lot of Haitians would say that the president wasn't fully elected, and so even that is pretty controversial. Haiti has not had a single elected official in office now for 3 years. The parliament has not been effective for now it's 5 years. It's run by a transitional president, which might be an improvement over what was there a year ago. But gangs control, a new estimate came out today, the 85% of Port-au-Prince, they control large areas outside. The entire country is under a state of emergency. 5 million Haitians, so close to half the population, are facing severe hunger. Inflation has been over 20%. We think our inflation gets high when it's 6 or 7. Haitians have had 20% for 4 years. It's just absolutely catastrophic governance. But one of the things from the sense of actually having elections, having governance, having justice, having food, having healthcare, having a well-run economy. Obviously, the U.S. international policies in Haiti have been a failure. But if your policy is to keep democracy from returning to Haiti and keep Haiti down, those policies have been a resounding success.
Okay, so just to bring us up to the modern day, just 2 years ago, so I read this book by Peter Hallward. That's how, I reached out to Peter for an interview, and he actually said, hey, over the past decade or so since I wrote that book, I've kind of worked on other things, but I would recommend, very humbly said, maybe I'm not the best representative for this. You should reach out to Brian Concannon and Kim Ives. And they've remained laser focused on the topic, and that's how I reached out to you, and that's how this interview came. But I finished reading this book, and at the time that this was written, we didn't have as much of a smoking gun in terms of French involvement in the coup d'etat of 2004 as we do today, or as we received in 2022. Could you just kind of explain that emergence that came out that wasn't known in this book at the time the book was written?
Yeah, so I'd also highly second your recommendation of Damming the Flood. Yeah. Excellent book. Peter was meticulous in documenting everything. I think he said, I'm going to say things that are going to challenge the status quo. And if I'm going to do it, I'm going to make it unchallengeable. And he really did do his homework. And so it's all very well sourced.
And I think you're quoted in it about a dozen times as well. I was, reading through it. I went through the index to kind of go through and before we spoke, get some of the quotations that you had in there as well. I think you're mentioned in it about a dozen times.
Yeah, I was happy to talk to Peter, but he talked to a lot of people. There's so much work on that. It was really impressive. Yeah, he didn't get that the French had admitted to doing. Everybody knew that the French were part of the U.S. attack on democracy, but it was only when the New York Times did an excellent series on Haiti's Independence Day called the ransom. And they did that in 2023 in the spring, and I'm sorry, 2022 in the spring. It's still an excellent series. And among the things, they actually got Haiti's then ambassador, France's then ambassador to Haiti to admit that, yeah, we did that because of the restitution claim. That's actually, I mean, it's shocking that France would depose someone for that reason, but it's actually, it's refreshing that a former diplomat would admit that. I don't see American diplomats admitting that after the fact, even though I certainly see Americans doing those kinds of undermining of Haiti's democracy.
Exactly. Okay, which brings us to our final question here. We arrive at the present day, and as of December of 2023, you and the IGDH are pursuing a formal lawsuit against France on behalf of Haiti for the illegal and immoral extraction of millions of dollars in debt from Haiti as a punishment for seeking independence and sovereignty, what some would probably call God-given rights. Can you elaborate on the specifics of this case? Like, just for the audience so it understands what you're actually alleging and seeking to accomplish?
One quick question, one quick correction. We're not filing a formal lawsuit. So which that raises actually a really interesting point, and probably the key point. So the best entity to file the lawsuit is the government of Haiti.
Right.
There's some legal arguments that individuals can. I think those arguments are hard, and it's much easier from the point of view of legal standing that the Haitian government do, because the Haitian government was who was forced to pay the money to France. That is why France and the U.S. got rid of the Haitian government in 2004, because then no one would have standing to pursue that complaint. That is why, since then, every government in Haiti has been propped up by the international community. And until last week, I kept saying, and no one has made a claim for restitution. One really interesting development is Haiti's president, a man named Edgar LeBlanc, and he's kind of, it's a president in a little bit of quotes. He's head of this presidential council of 7 voting members. We're sort of one of 7 people, and he's got the rotating presidency right now. But he spoke at the UN on Friday and explicitly called for restitution. As far as I know, he did not couple that with any legal claim, but there is now a working group at the State University to start moving forward. And so, going back to your question, when we launched this project about a year and a half ago, what we said was, look, Haiti's individuals don't have standing. Haiti's government does. In order for Haiti to make its restitution claim, you need a democratic, sovereign government, and which you had in 2004. But you need more than democratic, sovereign government. You need international support to allow that government to make the claim without being overthrown. And so we do work within Haiti to try to popularize the importance of the restitution claim and explain to people, what Haiti could do with the money. But we also are reaching out to people who care about racial justice outside of Haiti and say, hey, look, if you care about racial justice, if you care about reparations, you need to care about democracy in Haiti. Because, first of all, just from a moral standpoint, Haiti's been punished for 200 years for for being a leader of Black liberation. But also on a much more pragmatic level, if you want reparations, you need to support Haiti's government so it can make the claim for its restitution, which will open the door to the broader reparations claims. And so that's what we've been doing, and we've had some success. I mean, there's an entity called the UN Permanent Forum on People of African Descent, and at their session in Geneva in April, they made Haiti a real centerpiece of the whole forum. And at their next forum in New York, it's going to be one of the formal top issues that's being brought on. We've been involved in discussions on media, in workshops, in conferences all over the world where people, it's really low hanging fruit. It's very easy for people to understand why Haiti's poor, because it was it was the first Black nation to be free, and to make those connections between Haiti's historic role as a leader of Black liberation and also it's the history of suppression of Black liberation by suppressing Haiti. And so this is really kind of, we've been really excited. It's grown up, it's gone big. And even so, 2 months ago, the government appointed this study working group at the university. And then just Friday, the president made a call for restitution in front of the UN. My guess is, so he's there. He was basically put in office by the United States. So, I don't expect that he's going to really push it. But the fact that he even mentioned it at the UN is in a UN speech I think is huge amounts of progress within Haiti, but that he understands now that there's enough support internationally that he can actually talk about that and still make it off the plane back home when he gets home.
That's incredible. And so lastly, can you just tell the people, anybody listening, where they can follow you and to potentially support your efforts to seek justice for the historically persecuted people of Haiti?
Yeah. Thanks for asking that. So to follow us, the best place is our website, www.ijdh.org. Or if you're driving and you can't write it down, it's haitidemocracy.org. I'm also on Twitter as Haiti Justice, also Haiti Justice on Instagram, and IJDH on Instagram and Twitter. Please do consider supporting our work. We're not getting government funding for this. We're not getting corporate funding for this. We really rely on the generosity of individuals who care about justice to keep our work going. And again, you can donate at www.ijdh.org or www.haitidemocracy.org.
And just to end things here, I just want to extend my gratitude and thanks to you, firstly and primarily, for the work that you've done over the past 30 years, either individually or whatever capacity with the IJDH, the United Nations, whatever it is, for the work that you've put in to assist the people of Haiti legally, materially, or just from the process of educating other people about it. I just think the work that you're doing is so valuable, and I just want to thank you for that. And then secondly, I'd like to just thank you for coming in and taking about an hour of your day to come and speak to us, because we're a pretty small channel. We're just starting out. We don't have I don't know how advantageous it is to you in terms of publicity to come here and speak to us, but what we lack in audience, I like to think that we make up for in enthusiasm and our dedication to the historical record. So I really appreciate the work you've done and just your willingness to come in here and speak to us for a little bit.
Well, thanks so much, Pat. I've really enjoyed this conversation, but even more important, I think this is a really important conversation, and I'm grateful that you had it. I'm grateful you gave up an hour of your platform. Grateful that your listeners are listening, and I'm grateful that that you prepared, that you asked the really good questions, that all this is grounded in the historical record, and that's just a model of how journalism should be done, and I appreciate you doing it.
Thank you so much. And, maybe we'll be in contact in the future. Who knows, maybe, down the line we can get together for another discussion if, the occasion calls for it.
I'd love to. Haiti always illustrates something important about global power. So anytime you'd like me to come on, just let me know.
So don't run around here trying to make friends with somebody who's depriving you of your rights. They're not your friends. No, they're your enemies. Don't treat them like that and fight them, and you'll get your freedom. My repertoire is USSR. Be a low style, got thrown out the car. Rise for subversive plots. They'll call you an extremist or subversive or red radical. Rise for subversive plots. Red radical, and fight them. Capitalism and democracy. Capitalism and democracy are not synonymous. We group us up like ants in a colony. Organize the wealth into a socialist economy. A way of life based off the common needs. And all my comrades ready, people spreading the